Two experts in ICF.
Yeah.
Decades of experience. One podcast.
Yeah.
Two hosts with a lot to say.
Look, I cannot sit through a struggle. I gotta get up and hustle. I gotta push through the pain, cause really that's how you build muscle.
Welcome to the Build With ICF Podcast with your hosts, Trevor Brown and Heather Herring Brown. Yep, they're a package deal. With over 20 years of ICF installation experience, Trevor can throw down some expertise on sales, marketing, and training. On the other side of the table sits Heather, aka the girl boss. And she's earned the title as the owner of an award-winning ICF construction company, a drafting and design company specializing in ICF. And the numbers? With a master's in accounting, she does that too. Sleeves up, boots on. This is the Build With ICF Podcast.
I don't want nothing for free. I'm here to work. I've been through the dirt. I've been through the dirt, yeah.
Well, hello. We recorded a podcast the other day that was super cool. It was like new product coming out. And then I love how we're rolling from like a new product introductory to like installer, testimonial, actual user of ICF products.
Yeah, somebody doing like, we get a lot of people asking and, saying that this is, they love our testimony. We've done a couple of them. I think we're going to do a lot more of them. It was cool. Dave actually talked about how cool I think that the builders or the World of Concrete is, and the award ceremony, and how that's one of my favorite parts of the whole thing is getting to go there, because I see all these awesome people at these, at the awards that are
and awesome projects. Like it just
like you're seeing the project, but you're getting to meet the people and you're getting to see something, and it was super cool because Dave kind of walked over to me and was like, "Hey man, let's I want to talk about the podcast." And he had some just amazing projects going into the thing that we'll talk, going into the awards, and won some awards that were pretty awesome. But it was just kind of that true for me, a testimonial why I go and make sure I go to the Builders Awards every year at the World of Concrete, because you get to meet really cool people and people you admire. So episode 45, I did remember to look it up this time. So it's episode 45. And Dave I'm going to bring you in. Thank you, Dave, for coming on. Commercial contractor out of New Hampshire. If you want to give us just a little bit of background of who you are and how you got started.
I'll absolutely do that. First of all, thanks Trevor and Heather for having me on the podcast. I've caught every episode so far, except for I think a couple of the most recent episodes. So I've thoroughly enjoyed the podcast up to this point. I've known a number of the people you've had on the podcast, and so it's just it's something that has really connected with me. So yeah, like you said, Trevor, I saw you at the award ceremony at World of Concrete a few weeks back and recognized you. I had to introduce myself, and so obviously that led to the invitation to the podcast. So grateful to be on, excited to talk about what we're doing, our involvement with ICF over the past 2.5 decades, and I think it'll be a good conversation. So we first were exposed to ICF in 2001 at the International Builders Show. It was in Atlanta, Georgia at the time. And we wandered into this ICF booth, happened to be AMVIC, and bumped into this guy named Paul Camozzi.
Oh, Paul.
I'm sure
Infamous.
I've heard him on the podcast. I know you guys know him.
Love Paul.
Obviously, he was very enthusiastic. We were completely clueless about ICF at that time. And really we were less than a year into, after starting our own company. My dad, my brother, and myself started our company in 2000. And so we went to the International Builders Show the following February. And so we were new as a company. We were excited about construction. We were excited to see new projects and kind of get a feel for the industry. And so, like I said, we wandered into this ICF booth. We bumped into Paul Camozzi, and really were intrigued, but didn't leave the show with any specific plans of using ICF. Well, fast forward a few months later, beginning of the summer, we have a house lined up ahead of us. Our foundation contractor is supposed to be putting the foundation in beginning of July. Well, literally 2 days before he was supposed to dig the foundation hole, he calls us and he says, "Guys, I hate to do this, but I can't make it. I can't be there to dig it." We're like, "Well, what do you mean? We're waiting for you." And he said, "Yeah, I overcommitted. I just can't do it." And so he just completely backed out, no notice. And so here we are, again, fairly young business. This house is our backlog for the summer. And we're sitting there scratching our heads. What in the world are we going to do? We don't have concrete forms. We can't do this ourselves. And so my dad thought, wait a sec, do you remember these insulated concrete forms we had seen at the International Builders Show? Well, we reached out to Amvic. We connected with Paul Camozzi. He's like, guys, why don't you come up to Canada? I'll show you through the factory. I'll show you around. I'll give you some quick training. We ended up doing that, spending an afternoon with Paul. And long story short, that was our first project. It was a foundation for about a 3,500 square foot house. The homeowner happened to be very energy conscious, very excited about ICF when we proposed it. And so it was just an all around good experience for us. So for us, for our customer, so we came out of that project with a decent amount of excitement and optimism for integrating ICF into our future projects. So, that first project led to another, which led to another. Probably a couple years later, we had the opportunity to do our first house shell, ICF from footing all the way up to the roof. Again, that was a success. The homeowner was thrilled about it, about the comfort, the energy savings, the sound qualities. I mean, everything that is, all the positive things that are associated with ICF construction. So at that time, we were a residential builder. We focused exclusively on residential construction. Probably around 2010, we had the opportunity to do some commercial renovations, and that really kind of piqued our interest as far as getting into commercial construction. We were still obviously very, heavily involved in residential, but we started doing some commercial renovations and slowly merged into commercial construction as well. One of the notable residential projects we did was a 9,000 square foot ICF home in Epsom, New Hampshire, not too far from our home base in Rochester, New Hampshire. And the homeowners, actually, it was an acquaintance of my dad's. They weren't very familiar with our company, but they came to my dad and said, hey, we're interested in building this new house. It's going to be a decent sized house. And, we're interested in this new technology. You probably haven't heard of it, but it's called ICF. And my dad's like, well, you know what? We've actually been building with ICF for a number of years now, and we're incredibly excited about it. So we had the opportunity to build this 9,000 square foot house all the way from footing up to roof. It had interior walls around a theater room with an amdeck concrete floor system above that. The main level, the center of the house on the main level was a 2-story library. And then, there are a couple of huge windows behind that looking out over a stream. And so it was a really cool project for a number of reasons. Very unique house. Again, it was by far the most, extensive ICF project that we had done to that point. So it was, again, just a good project. It was, the homeowner loved it, very pleased with the final product. And so, just another great project to have under our belt. Well, while we were building that project, our ICF, our local ICF distributor, a Nudura distributor out of Greenland, New Hampshire, approached us and said, hey, I am working with the town of Portsmouth, New Hampshire, to help them design their new fire station out of ICF. And he said, you guys are the most capable and experienced ICF contractor around. Are you guys interested in coming in on this and bidding out the ICF? Well, that was up to that point, we had not done a commercial ICF project. And so, there was a little nervousness on my part. I won't lie about that, but we were like, you know what? This is a great opportunity. This is kind of where we want to go in the future. We're going to jump into this. We're going to bid on it and see what happens. Well, as I'm sure you guys know, commercial ICF construction is a lot different than residential ICF construction, especially a municipal building like that. We were sent all the drawings and documents to bid this project, which of course included structural drawings, architectural drawings, rebar shop drawings, steel shop drawings. I mean, the works. I mean, all of this stuff that you have to pour through and figure out. And I remember printing out those rebar shop drawings and laying them out on the conference table in our office. And I'm sure you guys have seen rebar shop drawings for commercial projects. I mean, it can make your head spin if you don't know what you're looking at.
Someone told me one time reading residential plans to commercial plans is like going from a comic book to a phone book. That's pretty much the difference in how many pages and details and my God.
Yeah. So we're looking at these rebar shop drawings. We're just, oh my gosh, what did we get ourselves into? And of course, after looking at them for a while, stuff started to make sense. Stuff started to fall into place. Again, steel shop drawings. There were just numerous embeds, through the walls for bar joists, for I-beams, canopies projecting from the building, and it was really a learning curve for us because again, up to that point we had done some pretty significant residential projects, but nothing like this. And furthermore, I mean, this was kind of a poster child project for the town of Portsmouth.
Yeah, it's going to be in front of everybody.
Large, visible fire station. It was the architect's first ICF project. I think it was a structural engineer's first ICF project, but I'm not 100% sure of that. And so this thing was, in my opinion, it was dramatically over-engineered.
Yeah.
I mean, there were
sounds like it.
There were 12-inch core walls around the apparatus bay with double mats and number 5s. Yeah. There were, just all sorts of hoop bars and tie bars and interior rebar columns and lintels inside the wall. Just a challenging, complicated project. Of course, 14 by 14 overhead doors, I think 6 in the front, 6 in the back. So it was a challenging project. Well, long story short, we got through that project. I'll admit there were a few hiccups, but overall it was a very successful project. We came out of that with, I think, a lot more respect in our area for, who we were as a company and our capabilities in ICF. So that was really our introduction into commercial ICF construction. And guys, jump in if you have any questions.
I'm sitting here going, I got a little sick to my stomach when you started mentioning all the rebar breakdown pages and stuff. I've been through those myself, and it's exhausting. It's just like one of those. It's so funny. I'm like having flashbacks of some of the, and I think all of us in the industry have done those steps, right? I think the best way to grow is the guy that, I tell everybody, I'm like, I wish every person would do a foundation first, right? Because that's what happened to us. We were getting into SIP, we thought about getting into SIP houses, and we kind of stumbled into it. IBS, the same kind of concept you did, kind of stumbled into these ICF things, and we could use these for a foundation, and but we're never going to build a house out of them. We're just going to do a foundation, and it was like, it was so easy that then it made you go like, I could do a basement, and then if I can do a basement, I could do an above grade, and you kind of progress into it. And I can just see, this is what was so interesting when looking at your journey in ICF and giving people an idea of like how, I don't know what the word, but almost addictive it gets, to where like when you really enjoy it and you're like, this is easy, we can take it to the next step. You're continuing to just take it to the next step all the time. But yeah, every one of us have had that situation where we open a set of plans that's bigger than the last one we've ever done, and we go, oh God, can I do this? Or differences in thicknesses of walls that change. And I mean, yeah, we've all been there. So
it's a little intimidating too when you're looking at those rebar schedules and you're like, oh my gosh, like this firehouse was, I'm assuming, a little bit smaller than a 9,000. I don't know. Maybe it was bigger than 9,000 square feet, and then a house. But it's like you're looking at, I've done these, with the Amdeck floors and ceilings and all this stuff. And then you're looking at this and you're like, this is so over-engineered. So my question, and then you answered it. So I'm glad I didn't interrupt, but it was drawn in ICF, and it was just everybody's first project. So it's interesting to see kind of the progression when somebody first starts drawing with it and engineering it. And then, we had this happen with some of our engineers, and, we draw plans nationwide. So we're always adding engineers to our, to our list of contacts, but we have meetings with them and talk about, what is necessary, what is over engineering, what is, just kind of working together, because we have to do that. We have to educate them so that we don't get these crazy rebar schedules that we can't get concrete around. So just super interesting.
Yeah. Well, I want to speak for the entire ICF industry and thank you for making a project go well that was high visibility, because I think we battle a lot of times people take on these huge projects in ICF. We've had a few locally where somebody bit off more than they could chew, and it went horribly, or not horribly, but it just took a long time. And then everybody's like, well, ICF takes a long time, so it was great. It's so great to hear a success story of like things going well, because I'm curious if have you used the architect again? Have you used the engineer again? Are they continuing to be more ICF friendly?
Yeah, I think we've worked with them on a couple of projects since, and it's, the projects were quite a bit different. So it was, it's hard to tell, but we certainly do we're fortunate to have a number of architectural firms and a number of engineering firms in our area that have extensive experience with ICF, are comfortable designing with ICF. And yeah, I mean, we're not in that boat anymore where we have to, work on a project like that. I mean, that's not to say that, we don't run into projects that aren't over-engineered, but, a lot of what we do is design build. A customer will come to us, whether, it used to be residential, now commercial. Like we've pretty much fully transitioned to commercial construction. We still do residential as an ICF installer, work as a subcontractor for that homeowner or the builder or developer. But the projects that we general contract are just commercial. So, most of the projects that we have now are, again, the commercial customers coming to us, and we're involved at the very beginning, as a design build contractor, and very often we're recommending the design team and working very closely with them through the pre-construction phase. So that certainly helps. But again, there still are those instances where a customer comes to us with fully designed plans and says, hey, we want you to bid these out. I think of a residential project that we completed a few years ago. It was about a 5,000 square foot house in southern New Hampshire. And the homeowner decided to hire an architect out of Washington State who had little to no ICF experience. And this house was just dramatically over-engineered. And I tried to work with them to simplify things, but, pretty quickly I realized that it wasn't going to happen. And, we made the best of it. We completed the project, but it's frustrating because projects like that, if you're not designing an ICF project the way it should be, it's not going to be a cost competitive project. It's going to be substantially more than wood frame or whatever other method. So it's so important to keep these projects competitive so people can see there's not a 50% premium to build with ICF. You can actually design and build these projects to be competitive with wood frame construction.
Yeah, it's a bigger, and it takes planning and communication. We say it all the time. It's like planning and communicate with these guys. We on a regular basis go either have coffee or lunch with our engineers, that we use for the drafting and design company, because and that's what we, a little plug for our drafting company for Innovative Drafting and Design. The reason we really wanted to dive into it was because we felt like nobody was designing it to ICF. I mean, they could say, well, we design an ICF, but they weren't actually going in and, getting the pricing part down, working with the engineers to keep the rebar in a manageable space, or measurements that worked out so you weren't tearing down block all the time and throwing it in the dumpster, going, say, if we move this window over 4 inches, we're going to save a little bit, and just little tweaks like that. And people think that, and we get it all the time. Trust me, this is one of the biggest things people blare at me about is like, you always say you could do it for the same as stick. I'm like, we do it for the same as. I'm not saying you can, I'm saying we do. are those projects. Now I'm saying maybe I don't make as much margin on one or here and there, but it's percentage points, like tiny little percentage points to build a better structure. But like you said, it's got to come down to the engineers. And once we sat down with our engineers and explained the cost difference between 4 and 5 and 5 and 6, they didn't even know because they never buy rebar. Engineers don't buy rebar. They couldn't even begin to tell you what the price of rebar is at most of the time. So when you tell them, say, when you put this in at this spacing and say 5 instead of 4, that it's going to increase the cost this much. And our engineers are great. We have great engineers. And they go, you know what? I did not know that. And I apologize. And every time they design now, they go, hey, if we space this out a little bit, if we, because we call it CYA engineering, right? Like everybody's just trying to cover theirs. They're making sure if they don't understand it, they over-engineer it, and so it's a huge thing. Heather deals with it a lot more than I do because she's got to battle with engineers on a daily basis. But
well, and it goes, and it depends on the client as well, because if they are very budget conscious, then we will do different things to make sure that we are, in full block measurements. We're trying to minimize waste. We're trying to do all of those things. Where sometimes you have a client and they're like, I don't care about that. I want it to look a certain way. I want this. I want this. I want this. I'm like, okay, we are limited only by your imagination and your checkbook. So if you're telling me this is how you want to do it, then I will meet with the engineer and we will do this and, we'll make it happen. It's the same thing with, when they're building with wood. It's the same thing. You can find ways to minimize costs, and you can find ways, that are not going to minimize costs. So I think it all comes down to it. And it's why I started the drafting company, because I just got so frustrated trying to educate somebody on a building method that I think is far superior than building with wood. And they didn't have time. They worked with, a majority of the other builders in my area. So switching over to ICF for me was totally different for them. I struggled my way through our very first project with them. We had a lot of errors on the plans because they didn't know. The engineers didn't know. And so we've come a long way since then. And the number of projects that you've done, the whole thing, it starts in planning and making sure that everybody's on the same page with the same goal in mind.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I always stress to customers and clients the importance of getting an architect on board and having a competent design done, a competent, design firm doing the design. Ideally, if it's going to be ICF, you want someone with experience in designing ICF. And, a lot of times, it's pretty much a given on any significant commercial project. There's going to be an architect involved. There's going to be engineers involved. It's pretty much a given. But on residential, we see it all the time, even yet, that where, a homeowner sketches something up on a CAD system that they downloaded from the internet. And, yes, you're saving that upfront design cost, but I've seen it time and again where they pay for it throughout the project, whether it's through, the project running inefficiently, whether it's through, using more materials than you should have needed to use, whatever it is. I'm a strong believer that, you get the building designed right from the beginning, and it's going to be smooth sailing after. Well, not necessarily always going to be smooth sailing, but it's going to be a lot smoother sailing than if you don't start with a complete design.
Exactly. And we have a lot of people that come to us and say, well, hey, I have this whole thing drawn up and, it's going to be stick frame. So-and-so said we can just switch it to ICF. I don't need to redraw my plans. And I'm like, well, technically, maybe you don't, but the job's going to go a lot easier if we go ahead and convert them and get these right measurements in there, because otherwise you're relying on everybody out in the field to make decisions when you're not there. You're relying on them to adjust where windows go and where this goes and where that goes. And sometimes those measurements won't work, because ICF is thicker. So just start with a good set of plans.
So going into more some of the stuff, I know that, like I said, I try to think like our listeners that are listening and wanting to hear kind of a little more of the boots on the ground information type stuff. So what would you say the largest project you've done now is, like square footage wise, or biggest building, or What would you consider your largest ICF project you've done to date?
We have yet to do like a really large, like some of the multifamilies and hotels that you see at the ICF Awards, the
Yeah.
20, 30-story buildings. We have yet to do something like that where, I'm confident we'll get there. A lot of the stuff we've done has been, we've done a number of public safety buildings, around 17 to 20,000 square feet. A couple of them that included a police and fire station. We've done a fire station that was about 15,000 square feet. We've done a couple of gun ranges using the Nudura 1 series for the gun range walls. We about 10 years ago, we built our own office building that we're currently in. It's about a 27,000 square foot building, one level below grade, 3 levels above grade.
Oh, wow.
And that's a building that we work very closely with the design team on the design. We made sure it was designed to be as cost effective as possible to build. We knew this was going to be a building that we were going to not only build, but we were going to maintain ownership for years to come. So, we wanted to make sure that one, it was a very cost effective building to build, but two, we were also very concerned about the performance of the building, long term. So, it's an office building that we're located in, that we have about 8 other tenants that we lease out space to. Just a fun fact on that, our last 2 natural gas bills for, I think, the months of December and January, again, the coldest months of the year here in New England, $1,900 worth of natural gas to heat 27,000 square feet. And
wow.
All we have in this building is natural gas. Yeah. We don't have any, you can argue that, yep, there's a big occupancy load that contributes to that. There's a lot of computers and equipment that give off heat. Yeah. But still, $1,900 a month for 27,000 square feet. That's not that bad. And,
No, we have
a neighbor that didn't build with ICF that looked at it, and he spent $1,400 a month the last couple months. So
on a 4,500 square foot house, and he's spending $1,400 a month, and he was sitting there complaining about, telling us how much it takes. We're like, we talked to you before you built that house. He came and toured our house. We had him convinced, but his builder he couldn't get his builder to change his mind, and so he let the builder drive. And the builder, I said, yeah, well, you should send that bill to your builder then, and have him pay your utility costs, because ours are a couple $100, and our house is similar in size and right across the street, and we pay a tenth of what he pays. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. I was looking there because we, like I said, at the Builder Awards, you were up for the award with the Bristol Public Safety Building, which was almost 20,000 square foot building. It was awesome. We're sitting here looking at the picture. I had Heather grab the brochure. I'm like, hey, grab the brochure. I wanted to see that. But that was awesome. What did you guys, I can't remember, you ended up winning for, because I saw you up there twice. I'm trying to remember. You guys got a People's Choice, I think, for it too, or something?
Exactly. Yeah. The Bristol Public Safety Building was the only submission we had this year. And we won first place and also the People's Choice Award for it. So we were
congratulations. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so those were our 5th and 6th ICF awards that we've won over the years. I think our first one was in 2010, and then, a number of years since then in between. So yeah, it was pretty exciting. I mean, I try to make it out to the world of concrete at least every other year, thoroughly enjoy it. And of course, if we're nominated for an award, that's just added incentive. So
yeah, that's great.
Well, being in the industry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, talking about going back to our office building that we built a number of years ago, the couple of winters ago, we had a pretty significant storm, and we have these huge pine trees out behind our building. And during the night, the wind blew one of those pine trees over onto the building. And I'm not exaggerating when I say the base of this pine tree was 36 inches in diameter. It was a massive pine tree. And so it tipped onto the building, and the trunk of the tree that hit the building was about 14 inches in diameter. Well, it hit the top of that concrete wall, and it literally it just shattered the tree. It shattered the pine tree. And I came into the office at about 7:00, and there was just like an explosion of branches. You know how dry the branches get on a pine tree, especially near the bottom, just all over the parking lot. And then I looked up and I saw this, this big trunk of a tree sticking off the top of the roof of our office building. And I went up on the roof and looked, and there were literally some punctures in the rubber, and there were some spots. The outside of our building is stucco. There were a number of spots where, the stucco was scratched up and gouged up. We ended up having about $3,000 worth of repairs between the rubber roof and the stucco.
Yeah.
If this had been a wood frame building, that would have sliced right down through the third floor and possibly through the third floor deck into the second floor. Yeah. And it hit directly above the lobby of one of our tenants. I mean, heaven forbid that had happened during the day. That could have been catastrophic.
Yeah.
But again, it hit that concrete wall, and it just snapped that pine tree, right in half. And that was it. So, I mean, there's a lot to be said about the energy efficiency, about the comfort of living in a building, but you also think about the security of living or working in an ICF building.
Well, it's the topic right now. Like, I mean, this is going to be a repeat for everybody listening from the last episode, because we just talked about this on the last episode. But like Heather and I, both sit on committees and boards at the National Association of Home Builders. And the one thing we've seen over the last couple of years is we've never got a ton of love as ICF people. Like, it's always been stick frame guys as kind of the main thing there. And in the last 2 years, they've started using the term resilient. We've almost replaced, I mean, we're obviously always saying affordable housing is probably the number one word used at IBS or at any of our meetings, but resilient has become a close second. And because of all the, the fires and the hurricanes and the tornadoes and all this stuff. And really what I think is going to truly drive growth in the ICF industry is insurance companies. And I think these insurance companies, whether it's a tree falling on a house or a tornado or a hurricane or a fire, anytime where there's damage to the property, it drives up the price of insurance. And if it gets to where it's happening too much, then they just do like what they're doing in California. They just pull out, and you can't get homeowners insurance. And even parts of the Gulf Coast and stuff where they're just like, we're not going to insure you because we know there's another hurricane coming, maybe 2 this year, and it's gonna cost us money. So they quit doing it. So I think that's another great example of like your insurance company just saved it. You just saved your insurance company a ton of money by building and not having to replace 2 floors and all the different construction that would have cost, instead of $3,000 would have cost $300,000 to fix that, stick frame building. So especially take into account if there would have been a situation where someone could have got injured or something or worse. So that's a huge part of it. So that's a great story, because that's another big selling point of why people do ICF that is kind of gone under. I wrote an article in the Builder magazine, and I always think about this, but I forget. I actually looked up the numbers, and it's in the magazine, but there's an ungodly amount of vehicles that hit houses every year. It's wild. Like, how many a day? Like, it's a weird number, like 5 or 8 cars a day hit houses across the U.S. And it's so funny. You can literally go into Google right now and type ICF house versus car, and you'll find all kinds of photos of cars that have careened off of roads and hit into houses, and the car is totaled and the house is fine. They have to replace some paint or stucco or something, right?
It's siding, yeah.
And you don't even think about that stuff, but it's like, what happens? That car careens off into a kid's bedroom, versus, in wood, the kid's dead. Like, and we talk about it with the ICF. I mean, there's just a lot of these additional things about ICF that make it so awesome. But one of the questions I had real quick, because before I forget it, is when you're running you've got these big jobs and stuff, what is an optimal size crew for you? Because I know a lot of our people listening are installers and
install crew. Yeah.
What do you guys like to run on a bigger job?
Obviously, it greatly depends on the project. I mean, if we're doing, a 1,000 square foot ICF foundation, it's going to be different than if we're doing, a large commercial project. Typically, though, kind of as a rule of thumb, on a medium-sized project, we would typically have 4 to 6 guys on it. Larger commercial projects, we'll probably bump that up. We'll probably, add on a couple of more laborers so that our skilled guys can really stay focused. But but I'd say overall, our crew is we typically run 4 to 6 guys on an ice.
So that's what we find. We find there's actually kind of a tipping point on job sites. We don't
Depending
do
on
a
the
lot
size,
of, we don't do any big commercial jobs or anything. All ours is residential, but some bigger residential and some different things. But I mean, I think every installer is going to be at the same point you are. At some point in their life, somebody's going to come to them with a bigger project and ask, can you do a church or a school? Because we're just seeing too much growth in that. And one of the things that people always kind of ask, I had this conversation with my son, who's one of my installers and runs a crew for us yesterday. And we've got one guy that's leaving. He found got another job doing some welding stuff that he wants to do. So he's not going to be stacking for us this year. And I was asking him, we're bidding out some jobs right now. And he's like, I think we're just going to run 2 of us. Like, I think we're going to go
3 or 4.
maybe,
when we have
and then on pour
alignment.
day, we might pick up 2 or 3, or maybe an extra guy on alignment day. But he says, I really think we've worked faster as 2 than we do as 3 or 4. Like, and I was interesting because we feel that way too. I've done crews where we work 6 or 8, and sometimes I feel like we would have been better with 3 or 4, and so we'll try to split them off, but we've never got into the 20,000 square foot, bigger buildings and stuff like that. But how many do you see? I know this changes too. Like, how many guys, let's say skilled guys, I'm sure, I don't want to badmouth any of your guys, I'm sure they're all skilled, but like lead guys versus, where you can kind of pick up a couple guys that don't know as much or new to ICF, what do you guys usually try to pair them off with?
Yeah. So again, I mean, there's a big difference between residential and commercial. What we find on our commercial projects, you need at least one guy who is experienced and dialed in, who can read and understand the structural drawings, the architectural drawings, who can look at the rebar shop drawings and make sure all the rebar is getting put in the right spots, who can look at the steel shop drawings and make sure all your embeds are going in the right spot. I mean, you get a steel embed that's 2 inches off or even an inch off. Well, now you're cutting concrete and you're patching and you're epoxying, and it's a nightmare. Now, times a project that might have 200 embeds in the wall for structural steel, you need at least one very competent person who can read and understand plans and make sure that what's happening on the plans is happening in real time. So, one person like that, and then we typically see 2 other very skilled, very experienced ICF guys. If you have those 3 people, you can supplement the rest of the crew with laborers, with relatively inexperienced laborers. That's one of the great things about ICF.
Right.
And in my experience, it's not like carpentry or wood frame construction where you have to know all these different framing details. And really,
you can't let a guy loose.
It's more challenging to keep a laborer busy on a wood frame construction project than ICF. I mean, with ICF, there's a lot more kind of repetitive steps to take, and so it's I find it a lot easier to keep laborers busy on an ICF project than on a wood frame project.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I wanted you to say, because I wanted to hear, because I think, and we talk about this with the manufacturers quite a bit, where we talk to guys saying, and they're like, what's the key to us selling more ICF and getting more ICF out in the world? And I always go back to the fact that installers, like, it literally, if there's one word that can lead to more ICF industry growing from a less than 10% of the industry to 20, 25 to 50, whatever our what we can do could be, is going to be the word installers. Like, because I can sell all the block in the world, but if I don't have guys that can complete the project, it's not going to work, right? We're not going to be able to get the project done. So being able to explain to people that, having those 1 or 2 really good guys, and just having guys, really focusing on having a couple really, really good guys, you can really expand your crew by being able to split them off and have guys functioning on a job. Because the interesting thing about the difference between stacking sticks and stacking blocks is we go horizontally. So like the first course is a little wonky, right? For the guy doing it the first time. Second course, he's kind of like, okay, I kind of got it figured out. Third course, he's like, oh, this is actually pretty easy. By the fourth course, he's trying to tell other people what to do. Like it's amazing how we watch that in training classes, how it's like course by course. And I always say the fourth course is the pro course, right? Like about the fourth course, everybody in the room thinks they're pros, right? And
then you introduce Windows.
And then you bring Windows in. Yeah. But it's like, seeing that kind of confidence grow with your workers. And so I say that because I hope that there's people out there listening right now that says, oh, I've only got a 2-man crew. We can't really take on these bigger projects. And not that I want everyone to go out and take on big projects, but I think that we can get the ICF industry into some of these bigger projects because there's an intimidation factor, right? And I think you can operate with less people than say you can with a framing crew or something.
Well, that's
like
what
that.
I was going to say. A framing crew, like one of our best installers was a framer, and he was just having a hard time getting, having enough guys that he could go and frame a 3,000 square foot home in the amount of time that it should take. Well, when we started introducing him to stacking ICF, then he was like, okay, well, I can do this with just a couple of guys. I understand this. It was faster. And then he's like, then all I'm doing is framing interior walls. That's simple. He's like, and then we get to the truss and we've got the truss crew that's coming out and, flying the trusses. But it's just interesting to see, from job site to job site, you have an ICF construction site. And then this is the same in commercial. You'll look, and one is, I guess you could call the more traditional route, and then the ICF route. And the number of people required to do it is so much less on the ICF route.
So Dave, we've mentioned that you've worked with, you started with Amvic, you did a job with Nudura. How many different block companies do you think you've worked with? Have you stayed with just those two? Is there, what would you tell people, about, your different experiences with different block companies?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we started, again, we were first introduced to Amvic. We used Amvic for a number of years. We were actually technically a distributor, here in New Hampshire for a number of years, but that was more or less just a way of getting the block. There were no distributors in our area.
Right.
And we really didn't, at our core, we were a construction company. We weren't a distributor. So we used Amvic for a number of years. Great product, great block. We were introduced to Nudura when we did our first commercial project, the Portsmouth Fire Station that I was just talking about. That project was designed and spec'd out to use Nudura block. And so that was our first opportunity to work with Nudura. We have, in addition to Amvic and Nudura, we've used probably all of the major blocks out there, Fox Blocks, Logic, Build Block, over the course of the past couple of decades. For the most part, most of what we do, we use Nudura. Mm-hmm. I personally think Nudura is one of the best ICF blocks on the market. Again, there a lot of great ICF manufacturers out there, but I prefer Nudura. If we're designing a project, we're going to spec it out with Nudura. Cool. Another major reason that we use Nudura is we have a phenomenal Nudura distributor right in our backyard. Yeah. Atlantic Builder Supply, Greenland, New Hampshire. We have worked with them for over a decade now, and just great full service distributor. They have whatever we need in stock. I make a phone call, it's on the job site. Just, don't have to worry about anything. So, you guys as an ICF builder, you can appreciate, what, the benefits of that. But yeah, I mean, we've used just about every major block out there over the years, but for the most part, what we're using on most of our projects is Nudura.
Okay. That's good to know. And I mean, it's we brought that up. We have an episode called How to Pick Your Block, how to pick a block, because we get people asking us, how do we decide? And I always put it right at the top. Like, I mean, a lot of these major block companies out there, it's pretty apples to apples. It's a Ford Chevy thing. It's whatever you prefer, but it's all about your supply. So I think
supply and support.
Yeah. Atlantic Builder Supply just got a really great commercial and sound clip out of that. If they want to, we need to forward an episode to this episode to them so they can tout this up. You did a great commercial for them, but no, kudos to them, man. And I don't think that I actually earned the right to speak for the whole ICF industry, but I have a podcast, so I can. But thank you, Atlantic Builder Supply, for helping our industry, because it is important to have those suppliers. Because I mean, as somebody who was a territory manager for 10 years, doing trying to set different guys up and pulling my hair out, having areas where people wanted ICF, but I couldn't get a supplier to buy into it, and we had to find all these finagle ways to make a like, just like your situation, make a builder into a distributor because that doesn't want to be, because I can't get somebody on. So God, that supply side is a huge help to us. So thanks to those guys. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I would, for those contractors that are looking to get into ICF, who are interested in experimenting with ICF, my recommendation to them would not be to worry about, hey, which block am I going to use? My recommendation would be start out by finding a very capable distributor in your area, someone you can partner with on future projects. Because again, I feel like, if you're looking at any one of the major ICF manufacturers, they're all good blocks. Some have benefits over others, but they're all good products. In my mind, there is a huge benefit to having a good, experienced ICF distributor, ideally in relatively close to wherever you're based out of, or wherever you're building.
Agreed. Well, Dave, so we've gotten kind of, we're running a little bit long, but that's fine because it's all been really good information. But we've got 3 questions that we ask all of our guests. So you shared a lot of memorable experiences in the past, 2.5 decades. So since you got started in this, but is there one memorable experience that you haven't shared with us today that kind of stands out to you?
Yeah, there is. My brother and I, my brother Joe, who is still involved in the business, was one of the founding members as well. We were talking about this morning, and he reminded me back in 2014, we were building this 9,000 square foot custom ICF home, and we were able to get the shell of that home closed in right before winter, and didn't have the HVAC system in there yet, but we were able to get temp heat in there. And so over the course of this bitterly cold New England winter, we set up this huge workshop in the center of the house in this big 2-story library. And we were able to do all the interior finish, like all this custom woodworking and all the interior finish. And again, picture this in your mind, big 2-story library. There's 2 huge 18-foot by 18-foot windows looking out over a beautiful, snow-scaped, stream with trees in the background. And we just had this whole workshop set up in there. And just, it was quiet. It was comfortable. It was just, it was about the best winter project you could imagine. and any other house, had that been a wood frame house, yes, we could have pumped temp heat into a wood frame house. But without it being completed, it would have been cold and it would have been drafty. Mm-hmm. But again, we had this ICF shell, this super insulated ICF shell roof system with closed cell spray foam above. And it was just this comfortable work environment for us over the winter. Just great memories on that.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so true. It's one of the benefits of building with ICF. I had a very similar, not quite that big, but had a house. We roughed in everything, and it was during COVID. And, during COVID, it seemed like everything, as you were progressing through a build, all of a sudden that's what we couldn't get. And so we couldn't get a furnace. So I had it was like a 3-story house, basement, main level, and then it had an ADU over the garage, and literally bought 3 space heaters. And that's what we heated the house with over the winter, and had guys working in there saying,
nobody believed it.
They're like, it's too hot in here. We gotta turn the furnace on.
Go turn that little heater off. And they're like, no, there's gotta be a bigger heater in here. No, that's the heater. It's just a little, electric heater. Yeah.
Yeah. It was just crazy. But yeah, that's a cool thing. All right. Do you want me to ask the next question, or you want to take it?
Yeah. Just taking, this is something that, like, what are you excited about? Like, this is, moving forward. I mean, you've seen so much, and you've seen so much growth in the industry. I mean, I know, just like myself, I mean, being in it for long enough, you're like, I don't know that we had hopes that it would get like this, but we never saw it getting to where it is now. And then it's like, I still look at it now and go, I think we've got so much more to grow, and there's so many different cool things. Is there anything that, whether it be growth in the industry, or is there certain products maybe that you're using? I know we've talked to people about fiberglass rebar or Helix, or, is there a product? Is there anything you're excited about in the future of ICF that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, definitely. So my answer is going to be similar to a number of other guests that I've heard on your podcast answer this question. I'm really excited about the future of ICF, and in our case, specifically about the future in the commercial market. We're seeing a lot of interest recently from municipalities. We're seeing a lot of interest in multifamily. We have a lot of opportunities to be involved in some pretty large multifamily projects that are starting to really consider ICF for a number of reasons. So I think there's huge potential in the future. And of course, the more stringent the energy codes get, the more ICF makes sense. I mean, it's just
they're coming to us.
It's a no-brainer. I think for we've seen it for decades now that homeowners they research ICF, they get excited about it, they see the savings, the comfort, all of that, and it's obvious, it clicks to them. We're finally starting to see that on the commercial side here too, where ICF is just kind of jumping out as the obvious choice. I was actually talking to a builder from Canada at the Fox Blocks booth at the World of Concrete, and he told me he was doing 5 ICF foundations a day, and I can't remember if it was Toronto or what. But he said, yeah, I'm doing 5 ICF foundations a day. And I said, wow. I said, how much of a premium is an ICF foundation to a conventional? He said, it's cheaper. I said, what? I mean, we're finding that whole projects often can come in cheaper, but when you're just comparing an ICF foundation to a conventional foundation, usually, at least around us, that ICF foundation is still a premium.
Right.
He said that the energy codes in Canada now require rigid insulation on both sides of the wall.
Yeah.
And so now, it's actually more material cost and more labor to do a conventional foundation and apply that rigid insulation to both sides of the wall than it is to just do an ICF foundation. Again, that's just one example. I mean, going forward, in my mind, ICF is just going to make more and more sense to people. It's going to become a more obvious, clear choice. And I think we're going to see, continued growth in the ICF industry.
Yeah, it's undeniable. I think at some points where that's the key is when people. I've been lucky enough to stand in front of rooms of large amounts of people talking to guys, a lot primarily stick frame guys, and talk about ICF and be, answering questions. Heather and I are actually at Builder Show this next week. We will be. Oh, I mentioned it. Sorry, I wasn't supposed to mention Builder Show because it's coming out after Builder Show. So everybody's seeing behind the curtain. We recorded this before Builder Show. Anyways, we're sitting on, we were asked to sit on a panel as ICF, as our, the podcast people and as ICF experts, because they want to start creating these panels for the NAHB for stick frame builders to come in and ask questions about these alternative building methods. So I think everything's kind of coming to us. And I've always said that about codes are coming towards us all the time. That's why they're like, we've been ahead of it. We're kind of saying, come on, keep coming. And that's going to make them have to do it. I think insurance companies are going to make people have to do it. I think that even getting into, kind of the municipalities and stuff. I mean, there's a big emphasis on, spending and different things at the government level right now, and people looking into what's being spent. I know we've been battling with the school districts a lot in our area because we have people that are building charter schools for a quarter of what they're building almost identical schools for the public school system. And we're like, how is the guy that is doing it with his own money able to build this school for a quarter of what the school district's saying it's going to cost to build this building, right? So people are really dialing in on where the tax dollars are being spent. And then you look at, so just even using your office buildings as an example, you look at what they would spend on a normal school versus
operational costs.
The operational cost day to day to heat and cool that school, that's taxpayer dollars. Those are our dollars that are being spent. Like, and if we know that there's a way for them to build the building for the same price or very close to it and change operational costs for the next 100 years for all the taxpayers that pay into the operational costs of that school, I mean, that's where I see everything. I agree with you 100%. Everything's kind of coming to us at this point, and it's only going to grow the industry. But go ahead. You can get third question. Sorry, I cut you off.
No,
there.
you can. Go ahead.
So this is and then I kind of two-part this, because we always like to end with kind of a little bit of a sales pitch here. Like, you know, we always say, why your product, but we're not, you know, I guess you kind of have a product with your company. So if you want to give a little pitch to that, I don't know if, you know, you want to explain maybe the area or territory that you guys will service or where you guys are interested in projects, but give us a little pitch of, you know, if you want anyone to reach out to you and what kind of projects you guys are looking for and what areas and that kind of stuff. Cause like I said, this podcast goes out to people all over the place. So, you know, maybe why you guys?
I appreciate that. Well, again, we have been building with ICF now for 24 years. We have somewhere right around 95 ICF projects completed and under our belt. We know ICF from the install side. We also know ICF as a general contractor. Now, again, focusing mostly on commercial construction, we have done countless commercial projects, start to finish. So we know how the different materials interact with ICF. We know how fixtures and systems interact with ICF. You know, we've had a very broad exposure to ICF construction in both residential and commercial. So I think that really gives us a leg up. Where most of what we do is in New Hampshire. Again, we're located in southeast New Hampshire, but we do projects in Maine. We do projects in Massachusetts. We've done projects in Vermont before. So we're willing to travel a little bit based on the project and if we feel it's a good fit. I think one of our strongest capabilities is working with companies, working with customers who are looking to design a project, have energy efficiency in mind. Maybe they're already familiar with ICF and they're looking to partner with a contractor who has that experience and can guide them through the design build process. Again, a lot of what we do is design build construction. We have architects, engineers, whole design teams that we can recommend that are very familiar with ICF construction. MEP engineers, for instance, you want someone who knows the energy efficiency of ICF construction and is not going to be over engineering the HVAC system.
100%.
We've seen that happen too many times where, they're designing an HVAC system for a wood frame building. And it's completely different than a building with an ICF shell. So we feel like we have a lot of capability from that standpoint. We're, when we started, we were one of the only contractors in the Northeast building with ICF. Now there are a lot of other capable ICF contractors out there, some of which we've worked with before. But again, as far as a contractor that has extensive experience in both residential and commercial construction, start to finish, I really think we have a leg up on a lot of our competition in this area. One other thing I should mention is we're always looking for skilled people to add to our team. And I mean, if there's anyone out there who is excited about ICF, has experience, maybe even is just getting into ICF, we're always looking to add crew members, foremen, project managers. There are all sorts of opportunities. I would encourage them to look me up and contact me. My email address is dave@Groen construction. Definitely feel free to email me if someone is interested or has questions. We just relaunched our website, a redesigned website. That's groenconstruction.com, Groen construction.com. So I would encourage people to visit that and check that out. But yeah, that's, again, we're an enthusiastic participant in the ICF construction industry and are pretty optimistic about the future.
Understatement of the day right there. You guys are awesome. Like I said, just so excited. That just we get this episode out here because, like I said, there's not a lot of people that go out of their way to come up and introduce yourself and get to know you. And I tell you what, I respect what you've done in the industry, and I thank you for all the efforts that you guys have put in and that your company continues to do. I love the enthusiasm, and that's what we need. I mean, that's what's going to grow our industry, right? Is enthusiastic proponents of our industry. Yourself, myself, our previous guests that have been on here that are promoting the industry. I mean, that's really how we're going to grow, and I love it. Yeah, please, everybody, reach out. If you're in the area, if you're New England area, and you want to reach out to them, I will put all the contacts in our show notes, so those will be in there as well. So everybody should be able to link to Dave through that and through their website. I went and checked out your website. You're right. Awesome website. Great website. I get kind of snobby about that stuff. I go on there and look at people's stuff and say if it's good or not. It's really good. But it is a good website, and I, with confidence, can send people over there, and you'll love it. So thank you so much for being on the podcast. This has been a great show. This is exactly what we were hoping it would be, and even better. So we will go ahead and reach anyone that wants to reach out to us as well, if it are through our Instagram or any of our socials at Build With ICF.
You can reach us on email, info@buildwithicf.com.
Yep.
Website, buildwithicf.com, all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, and anything, we'll plug our swag again. If we're selling shirts, we got all kinds of Build With ICF shirts and different things. So plug that in there. But if there's anything you guys want to hear, continue to remind you, a lot of our episodes are based on questions we get from people and things that people want to hear about. So keep sending those in to us and let us know what you want, what kind of subjects you want us to get, and we will do everything we can to make that happen. Other than that, I think we're pretty good.
We'll Thank you again, Dave. Along. This was great. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Trevor, Heather, again, I appreciate the invite. Thoroughly enjoyed this, and I hope our paths will cross in the future.
Oh, it will. It will. I guarantee that. So
we'll make sure of that.
Thanks, Dave. And we'll go ahead and see you guys next time.
2X